Did you get the link?
Yeah. I'm launching the meeting now.
Oh yeah, nice.
There we go. Sound.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I'm in the waiting room.
All right.
Hello.
Hi, Jack. So you can hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So it's very exciting. Actually, this is my first. I think this is the first time I've done a podcast through Zoom. So
Oh.
it should be all okay. But I've got two separate devices recording this, so hopefully together we'll get something set up. So yeah, how are you doing today? You said we were just talking before you joined the call. You said you're ill at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not bad. Yeah, I just got a bit of a cold. I'm coming off the
Yeah.
back end of it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, not bad.
Fair enough. So I've got a lot of things I want to talk to you about, but I suppose a good place to start would be so again, like you said, you're reading up on something about I don't really understand it, but about sort of the link between consciousness and like physics and how. I mean, perhaps you could explain it better than I am.
Yeah. So there's a guy called Stuart Hammeroff who is an anaesthetist, like a doctor, and he wrote a paper in conjunction with Roger Penrose, who's like one of the biggest names in mathematics. And basically, it was called the Ochoa theory. It posited that, well, to understand what it's actually saying, you've got to understand some of the problems that it's trying to address. One of those is that it's shown that the human brain can only react to stimuli that occur like over the time course of like 200 milliseconds. Like that's the fastest reaction time. But it's been shown when people are playing tennis or when people have been looking at the movement of dots on a screen or something, they're able to actually consciously perceive movements which occur up to 50 milliseconds in time, despite neurons not even firing, during the occurrence of that stimulus.
How would you recognise that playing tennis is the example you use, just so perhaps you can illustrate it? You're saying they did studies on people or playing tennis.
Yeah, so like for example, like Rafael Nadal, he's got motor neurons which are connected to his brain, and then it's causing his muscles to contract in such a way to hit the ball when he's seeing it. But the ball might be coming at him at 100 miles per hour, and the movement of it from one point to another, the amount of distance it traverses within 200 milliseconds is more than he would be able to account for within the movement of his muscles if he was consciously perceiving the ball every point in its journey. So basically, when he hits it, he's not having a conscious experience of seeing the ball. And then that's where this theory comes into play, because it's saying there's a retroactive effect of time on quantum particles which govern conscious experience, and that causes basically an experience of the event to be relayed to your conscious mind after it's happened.
Okay, so like when Nadal was like hitting the ball, he's not. You're saying it's not a conscious. Well, I mean, it's conscious to an extent, but it's like tapping into something deeper in the brain.
So to try and explain it, like the speed at which his neurons are capable of responding is only 200 milliseconds, but this like his response in real time to that stimulus will be less than 200 milliseconds.
Okay.
So even though he's having no conscious experience of what's happening, he'll still have a memory of like what's happened, and that will be experienced consciously. But
Yeah,
that's because of this backwards time effect,
that's
not because he's experiencing it in real time.
okay. Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. That's really interesting. I mean, um, we'll go back to that, but I suppose a little side track to that, which I'll be interested to ask you, is what does that mean for like free will? I mean, just do you aware of the sort of debate about free will and
Yeah,
whether we have it? You know, like we kind of think we're making conscious decisions, but are we? I mean,
yeah. So that's a big problem. It's addressed by this theory. It's called the Ochoa theory, and
mhm.
basically the issue is that if your brain only responds to something after a certain amount of time, but in the moment you're so say for example you've got two dots, one's a red dot, and then 50 milliseconds later there's a green dot that appears on the opposite end of the screen.
Yeah,
Your conscious mind will perceive that red dot as moving, hitting the midline, and then changing into a green dot, even though your neurons only fire after that event has occurred. So basically, people like Daniel Dennett in 1991, he had a theory where he said this proves that determinism is, you know, pretty much a validated theory because you had no conscious experience of this because your brain wasn't firing any like neuronal events, but retroactively your
mhm.
mind is giving you the experience of seeing this red dot move, hit the midline, and then change into a green dot when it reaches the other side of the screen, even
And
though they
so
know because of how they program them dots that that doesn't happen.
determinism is uh I've heard it before, but what is it exactly?
Yeah, so it's basically the idea that every action that we take in the universe is like governed by laws which aren't able to be molded by ourselves. Like
Okay,
basically, if things happen to us, we don't consciously make decisions.
okay. And so with that dot example, like it happens. Like obviously, I'm simplifying quite a lot, but you're saying it happens so quickly that your mind can't comprehend it, but then you have a memory
Yeah, yeah,
of comprehending it, even though
yeah,
you didn't
yeah,
actually
exactly.
experience it.
Yeah, so your conscious mind will relay an experience that you didn't actually have because your neurons weren't firing, and
Yeah,
also that thing never happened. It's like a retroactive rewriting of your experience that your conscious mind gives you to tell you this has happened, even though it hasn't.
how does your conscious mind? How is it able to tell you it's happened? How are you able to have a memory of it if you haven't seen it yourself?
See, that's where there's like competing theories because the Daniel Dennett theory, which is it's a determinist theory, basically says that our mind lies to us and invents this experience
Okay.
to preserve the illusion of free will. And in reality, we don't have any free will. The Ochoa theory states that there's a number of quantum computations which are happening within these microtubules within the neurons of our cells. And the quantum entanglements between these microtubules means that there'll be a collapse of a waveform, and then that'll cause a gamma synchrony across the entirety of a number of neurons within an integrating fire network, and that will fire off a pathway of like neuronal firings after an event has happened because back in time these
Mhm.
quantum computational effects are happening as the thing occurs. So basically the thing that happened back in time
Yeah.
is having an effect only for like further in the future because these particles responded earlier.
Okay, and this is going back to what you were saying earlier. This is the sort of theory that might prove that um, like the sort of again I'm pretty simplifying this quite a lot, but like the your brain kind of has a relationship with the past in a sense that it
Yeah,
can to gather information about the future.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
okay,
so that was how I wrote a separate theory before I'd come into contact with this OR theory, and a lot of the ideas that I had in there have almost been echoed or, like, in a sense, validated
yeah.
by this actual scientific framework.
Okay, yeah, that's so. So no one really knows. I mean, we can sort of debate about it, but no one quite knows how like the brain can remember these dots changing color.
Yeah,
But there are two theories about it. Either it's an illusion, or your brain's sort of remembering it from the past. Like it's taking it from the
yeah,
past, even though you didn't experience it. Those are the two.
yeah. So Daniel Dennett would say you saw a green dot on one side of the screen and a red dot on the other side of the screen, and your brain, after the event had occurred, gave you the experience retroactively that you saw it move, and then like basically implanted a false experience into your mind
Yeah,
to make you believe that you consciously perceived it as it was happening. The Ochoa theory says you did consciously perceive it as it was happening, but it was just relayed to your mind in a delayed sense because these quantum activities took a while to cause the firing of your neurons, even
yeah.
though it was reacting in real time.
Okay, that's really interesting. And so you're saying how this. So you did an EPQ about a similar topic. So about how the sort of there's something going on that we don't really understand with the brain, and like how the particles in your brain kind of exist in the past, for want of better words. They have a sort of relationship with the past that informs the present.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So I remember, I don't know if it was you telling me this or Dylan, our sort of mutual friends. Just for those who don't know, but so I remember him saying that people took a test where one group was told the answers after the test, and then one
yeah,
group wasn't told the answers, and then the group who did the test and then were told the answers did better, or it was something like that.
yeah. That's right. So there are actually three groups. So
Okay,
there's one who were given the correct answers after, one who were given incorrect answers after, and then one who were given no answers after.
okay,
And then I remember the averages that each of them scored.
yeah,
So the group given the correct answers after, Group A, out of the 10 questions, they scored an average of 4.125
hmm,
out of 10. And it was a multiple choice selection. I think there were like four, I think it was four. No, it was five multiple choice, like potential answers. So
hmm,
if they were randomly guessing, you would assume 2.5 would be the score that they would get.
okay,
Um, hold on, let me one. No, it was four multiple choice potential answers. So you'd expect 2.5 to be the average that they get.
okay,
The group that were given the incorrect answers, the average that they got was 2.1, and then the group that were given no answers, the average that they got was 2.43. So that was close to what you would expect if it was just completely random guessing. So obviously the group who were given the correct answers after tests had already been collected in, but importantly not been observed,
yeah,
they scored statistically a significant amount higher than the other groups who were either given incorrect or no answers.
yeah, yeah. That is so weird. That is so weird.
Yeah,
Was that a test you did yourself for your EPQ, or was that just data from
yeah.
another? So you
No,
did,
it was. I did this in my
okay.
school. I went to a number of classrooms and basically handed out this questionnaire that I made and then gave out the answers afterwards.
That's so weird.
Yeah,
Wow.
I know.
What
It was
were the
bizarre.
questions like? I mean, obviously they were random. You wanted them to be quite random, I'm guessing, but can you remember any of the questions?
Yeah, there was some where it was like, where's the center of the universe? And then in the correct answers, I'd put like everywhere. The center of the universe is everywhere because it's
Okay.
expanded out of everywhere from all points. And then in the incorrect answers, I said it was some like the largest supermassive black hole
Hmm.
in the universe. And then that was an answer which statistically chosen much more on the people who were given that incorrect answer after the test
That's
and
so
after they'd
weird.
been collected in.
How long after the test did you give um, the correct answers, or the incorrect answers?
So it was immediately after I'd collected all of the answer sheets.
Okay.
So they could have had no chance to change their answers. But
Okay.
it's like the double slit experiment where I did not observe the test answers that they gave until after they'd all read the potential um, like the answers that I gave out afterwards.
Right.
Because if I did observe it before I'd given them the answers, then it'd be like a collapse of the waveform, and it would basically invalidate the test.
Well, what? So sorry. Why would that invalidate the test?
Because I'm seeing if there's a retroactive effect of time,
Yeah.
and then if you like, there's like the many worlds kind of interpretation. Um, if I look before I've given them the answers, then there's nothing in the future which is influencing their choices in the present. But then if I give them the answers and then I look at their answer sheets afterwards,
Hmm.
basically in terms of this like double slit experiment, whether it's being observed or it's not being observed, it determines how the quantum activity behaves.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it was like splitting off and creating a different universe depending on when I observed those test sheets.
But that would. Are you saying that would affect the answers that they give if you looked at them?
It would affect the validity of the experiment,
Okay.
and I think so I think it would have affected the answers that they gave
Yeah.
only because the universe I would have lived in after that point would have been one in which the answers I gave afterwards haven't influenced the answers they put down on the sheet.
Right. Okay. That's that's really wow. I mean, what gave you the well, what got you interested in this in the first place? This sort of experiment.
I, well, that experiment in particular, I think, was I'm not really sure. Like I just had a varied number of interests at that time. One of them was quantum physics. One of them was the idea of consciousness, the philosophy of time. Like
Hmm.
there were a number of things. I think they all kind of coincided. And the most important thing for me at that time was understanding how the mind worked. But the whole idea of that paper was to perform an analysis of the concept of intuition
Hmm. Hmm.
and like how like intuitive choices in my conceptual framework was basically your future conscious mind relaying the experience that you're going to have into the past version of yourself to then give you the idea to choose a particular answer over another.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Um. Yeah. I mean, it's so much to get into. It's really interesting. And you did this for your EPQ, so you done like you sort of researched it, and then recently you found all this other stuff that it's like people have studied it in a slightly separate scenario that you didn't know about at the time.
Yeah, exactly. So their mechanism for explaining this backwards time effect is completely different to my one.
Right.
Like
Okay.
my one involved modeling the brain in higher temporal dimensions, which is not something which has been experimentally validated. But I just thought that was the only way I could actually explain this theory and
Mm.
how electrons could be in two places in two different times, despite being the same electron and exerting the same effect on your neuronal firing.
And so, um, what's just how would you explain time then if like these electrons are in two places at the same time? Uh, like has time like already happened and we're just kind of viewing it through our own like own lens, or is it is does the future not exist? I mean, like, do you have an opinion about
Um,
that?
I understand your question. I think it's really difficult because our whole experience of time is basically given to us by our senses. Like as humans, we basically can't think outside of a spatial or temporal framework. So I think having any intuition about time, which is correct, automatically has to be run through like how our mind processes the world, and that means that I think I think all we can know is about our experience of time. I don't think we can ever know about time itself. I think for particles who operate on a quantum framework, it's probably not possible to imagine classically how they behave.
Okay. You mean like the brain's too? I mean, I guess that's the problem with like quantum physics and stuff is it's really difficult to get a good grasp of what the universe is like outside of our own perception because we like it's like so we can't really think outside of our own senses.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. That's yeah.
Mm, mm. That is weird. Yeah. There's another thing I was going to ask you about that. Oh, I've forgotten it. That's really annoying. Um, well, what's your sort of like? Because you do a degree as well, so like this must be quite. Is it like a sort of side hobby, or is this like something you see yourself pursuing in the future? This research.
I feel like the degree is more of a side hobby.
Okay.
Because like obviously I need a career, I need to work and
Yeah.
live and like have a life, and I want to have an impact on the world, which is why I chose medicine,
Mhm.
and I want to be able to help as many people as I can. But I think in terms of a legacy, I think thinking about these complex topics and then maybe like getting incrementally closer to a solution for an idea of how the mind works and what actually is being. I
Mm.
feel like that's a better way to approach a legacy than just acts in the world.
What do you think? How would this sort of research make the world better?
I think if you understand yourself better, then you can inaugurate a system of values which enables you to live in the most fulfilling way possible. I think that's the ultimate goal of all philosophy, even if it's not properly articulated. I think it's to create that system of values
Yeah.
and then live accordingly.
Do you think uh I mean you're talking about the nature of the universe and stuff. Do you think there's a gods behind it or like some kind of prime mover or do you think that's just like a human way of understanding the universe?
Um, I've it's really hard for me because I am a Christian. I do believe in God,
Okay, I didn't know
and
that. I didn't know that. Interesting.
it's very
Okay.
difficult to reconcile certain
Yeah.
beliefs with like scientific dogma.
So just quickly,
Um,
is that like have you been raised up a Christian or is that something you sort of
so like
found if you will?
I was a Christian in my childhood, and then my granddad died. He was like my primary caregiver,
Yeah.
and then I was very like I became like complete militant atheist when I was 13. When I was 18, I had a near death experience, and then when I was very close to dying, I basically, as like a last resort, turned to Christianity, and
Okay.
then got completely better, like remarkably quickly.
What was your near death
I just
experience?
can't explain it. I had like multiple organ failure,
Jesus. Okay.
like liver failure and stuff, but like they never found out what it was. Like I had a number of tests and stuff. Doctors just didn't know. But I really can't explain it, and I think a lot of human experience is unexplainable.
Yeah.
And I think I'd rather believe in something which has verifiably affected my life than just a bunch of like scientific papers.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll get back to all the stuff, but just on that quickly, like, do you practice? So how do you practice? You go to church, or is it more of just a belief? Um,
Yeah, I do go to church. I'm quite bad at it, to be
yeah,
honest. Um, just because I'm not the best at waking up early.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, especially when I lived last year. in Fallowfield, I'd always travel on the bus down to at 7 o'clock mass.
Okay, which one did you go to?
The Holy Name. It's
Okay, which
the
one's
big
that?
Catholic one next to the Stopford building.
Oh, by the uni.
Yeah, yeah,
That
it's really
is
nice.
that's a lovely church.
It
um,
is. It's why it's so good to just clear your mind.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I do. I've been in there a few times just after a busy sort of day at uni or whatever. And it's just so nice. I think I went there one time and they just had candles on the sort of little aisle up to the front of the church. And it's
Yeah,
pretty. I mean, that's what I like about Catholicism, and I think to some extent the Eastern Orthodox as well. Is it just really
yeah,
tugs at the sort of like the drama of religion.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah,
I mean, do
I
you?
think.
Sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, like, I think some of the most beautiful buildings in the world are made in a religious context. Like
Yeah,
they're meant to be basically a way of worshipping God, and I think one of my big interests is architecture. So it's I don't know. I think it's a really good way to combine an interest in theology and obviously architecture.
do you? So you obviously go to a Catholic church. Would you see yourself as Catholic, or are you just more like any denomination is good?
I think division in the church is probably a bad thing.
Mm.
I think if the church is divided into two, then maybe the fervour of each individual aspect of Christianity would increase. But I think in the way it is now, where there's hundreds of different denominations,
Yeah,
it just makes it seem a bit too relative and a bit too like up in the air.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think it's hard to believe in a world where there's no one true Christianity.
Okay, so you just see any denomination as being of equal value.
Yeah, I wish there was one, but if there isn't, then I think
Yeah,
well, to be honest, I think the one that goes closest to what the original teachings were. So I honestly don't think that's Catholicism. I think it's closer to probably Gnosticism. But
okay,
obviously that's dead.
yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, it's interesting you were saying about architecture. I'm thinking a lot about this at the moment because it kind of goes into my own dissertation. Um,
Mm,
but like, uh, some churches, depending on the denomination, has such a massive impact on the architecture. So like, a sort of Church of England is very stripped back and plain, and
yeah,
then like the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church as well. It's all about kind of the ceremony behind it. Um,
yeah,
and I think one of what I think makes what I like about Islam as well is it's a similar thing. It's a lot about the ceremony of the religion. You know, like if you go inside a mosque, they're always very beautiful. Like the ceremonial
yeah.
languages is a really big part of the teaching as well. Like learning the Quranic Arabic and stuff. Um,
Mm.
so, like, do you think in sort of more like Protestantism, for example, do you think it matters that we've lost the ceremony behind religion, or is it more about
Yeah,
the dogma, like you're saying?
no, I think so. I think aspiring towards beauty is probably the best way that you can honor God. I think losing that in Protestantism,
Yeah,
I don't know. I think that there's a lot of beauty lost in it, but obviously, like you get the work ethic, and it's probably built up this country more than anything else.
yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting that like the Germanic speaking worlds, like the ones that sort of accepted or adopted, I should say, Protestantism. That's really been
Yeah,
like the sort of um, they've really taken over. it's interesting that like Germany and the UK and the Scandinavian countries just have such high sort of production productivity and like
Yeah,
quality of life. I guess. I mean, I know it's a like debatable topic. And then um, like Italy and like Eastern Europe, still very beautiful places, but economically kind of fallen behind slightly. I wonder whether religion and like the work ethics has got something to do with that. But I don't know.
I think it definitely does because early Protestantism was more it was more Puritan in terms of its values, where I think it's like a lot of the Catholicism, which was more prevalent around places like Italy and Eastern Europe. But it was more orthodoxy around Eastern Europe, but it was
Mm.
quite decadent in many cases, and it was like a lot of even the clergy were hoarding wealth and hoarding power. I think that kind of went um, with the Reformation. I think that was one of the main points of the Reformation.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but it's funny because like at the same time you think about the empire of the Arabic world, like in the Middle Ages, and
Yeah,
I don't know too much about Islam, but my impression from it is it has that kind of ceremony. Like, it doesn't. It's more alike to Catholicism than to Protestantism. Like it's very ceremonial religion, like architecture. Um, but then at the same time, it still had that sort of period of a golden era where it was one of the most wealthy places in the world. So
yeah.
it's a
During the
contradiction at the
Rashidun
same time.
Caliphate, it was definitely even the Byzantines were terrified. The Rashidun Caliphate.
The what? Sorry.
So the first Arabian Empire
Mhm.
that came after the time of Muhammad was the Rashidun Caliphate,
Okay.
and then you had the Umayyads, and then the Abbasids, and they were more like successor states.
Mm. Yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
something I
but
know very little about actually, but it sounds really fascinating. And it's just weird that you had this, and then you look at Europe during most of the Middle Ages, and it's just like no comparison in terms of just the scientific output, development. It's really weird.
yeah, definitely, I agree.
Um, with religion, like, do you believe in heaven and hell being literal things? Like, do you think you go to heaven when you die, or do you see it as like an analogy for life? Like if you manifest heaven through um, doing God's will. Do you think, like how do you see heaven and hell relating?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I see it more as probably a mechanism for control of the masses. To be honest, because
Yeah,
it's like if that sponsors the ultimate good and the ultimate bad, then it does kind of make you want to not do bad things.
yeah,
I don't know. It seems like something that would be more top down and more useful for political figures than like theologically sound. Because how can a finite amount of sin warrant infinite punishment? I'm not sure if it follows.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's one of the hardest things to reconcile for me with Christianity is that I don't know. There's something just very off-putting um, about it. I think I mean I don't know if you've heard of this idea of like purgatory being or hell being like a realization of your own sin. Like I like that idea, and
Yeah,
I like the sort of I guess it's more of a like the Rastafarian idea of and Jewish idea I guess of manifesting heaven in yourself. Like something you live rather than God just sort of gives it to you when you die. Um, So
Yeah,
yeah, but then there are lots of people who, I mean, a lot of my family really do believe quite, because I've got quite a religious family, and a lot of them
yeah,
do to talk about heaven and hell in quite um, traditional ways, and it's very weird. Like it's, I mean, there's something there that clearly captures people's imagination.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's a very evocative idea.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, we've got a bit off topic, but you were saying um, there's a sort of conflict in your mind about how you reconcile religion and science, it like your own findings, um, and then your sort of personal belief in God.
Yeah, I think that just arises from like a literal reading of the Bible, and I think especially because it was written within a context 2,000 years ago, where the world was very different than it is now, and it was written through the eyes of authors living around that time who will have had certain beliefs which will have crept in. And also, I'm not sure how much of the actual doctrine written in there will have been changed by subsequent popes and, you know, leaders of the Roman Empire or like different kings around Europe before the
Hmm.
printing press was, you know, was invented. I'm not sure how much of it is original and how much of it was created as a political tool and
Yeah,
how much of
no,
it is a remnant of the humans writing it.
yeah, and the other thing is, like, I mean, I was thinking about this the other day because there's this YouTuber I started following who's a sort of, he says self improvement, but he's very religious, and he was sort of
Mm,
talking about the Bible and stuff, and obviously there are lots of contradictions in the Bible, and I was just thinking like, there's really not. It's just it's not like a comprehensive thing. I guess you can't really write down everything, and the attitude to something like the Bible, where it's just so many different books written over such a big period, is just
yeah,
like, I think you can only ever really just get started with it. It's never gonna. There's always more to think about, and um, read. It's not like you just read it and then like everyone has the same idea. Um, because like you're saying, it's written over so many years, and I mean that's an interesting idea that you think like bits of it could have been changed before the printing press as well.
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I mean, I guess that was a big thing. This meeting's going to run out because it's just a trial version of Zoom. So I'm going to end it, but I'll send you another link, and then um, we can continue this conversation.
yeah. All right, cool. Yeah.
Sure, I'll be 2 secs. Can you hear me? Hi, Jack. Can you hear me?
Oh, hello. Yeah,
Hi, yeah.
again.
Sorry about that. Yeah, we should be okay for the rest of the Zoom meeting. I think. Yeah. Yeah. They kick you off after 40 minutes. But
All right.
you got to go at 6 o'clock, haven't you? So we've
Yeah,
got
yeah,
another half an hour. Yeah. So what were we talking about? We were on like how doctrine gets changed over time before the printing press. I mean, I guess the printing press must have been. It's really easy to underestimate how miraculous the printing press must have been like in a time before. Like, if you wanted to have a book, you'd have to write it out yourself, which would
yeah,
take just such a long time. I mean, I think it's really interesting studying classics, and the idea that we still have these texts. Like, I mean, the Iliad and the Odyssey. It's just like that has been rewritten for just thousands of years until eventually it was put on the printing press. I mean, that's just so weird, isn't it? Um,
Yeah, I know, and I wonder how much has been lost as well.
yeah,
Because I know we lost all of Aristotle's dialogues. Like he wrote a few dialogues in the style of Plato, and then all of Plato's lectures as well.
yeah.
They've
There's
all been lost.
so much we've lost. I mean, it's really interesting. The Odyssey and the Iliad. There's so many other epic poems that were around of like a similar length and subjects that were just lost.
Yeah,
Like I don't know if you've come across there's like one about um, the Ethiopians because after Hector's buried, there's a whole thing about the Ethiopians coming to Troy, and I mean, wouldn't that be so cool to read? And but that was
yeah,
lost, and then the actual poem that documents the sack of Troy, that's been lost as well. And it's such a shame because they'd be so interesting to read.
yeah, exactly. And it's part of our heritage
Mm,
is Europe. It's just so much of it lost.
mm, mm. Um, yeah, you were talking about Plato and Aristotle. Which one do you think's had the biggest impacts on Western thought?
Oh, that's really hard. Um, oh, yeah, that's a really tough question. I'm not sure. Um, God, I want to say Aristotle, probably because it was. I don't know. I think maybe Aristotle because of the writings of Thomas Aquinas, where he was trying to reconcile Aristotle's understanding of the universe with Christian theology, and then the massive impact that had on the whole medieval age.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then I'm not sure. I don't know, but even Alfred North Whitehead as well said that all of Western philosophy can be considered as a set of footnotes to Plato.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a really tough question, and then Plato did influence Aristotle as well. So
yeah.
I just it's
No,
really tough. I can't decide between the two. I don't think.
yeah. I don't really have an answer myself, so quite what I expect you to answer. I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends what you think's the big, what's the big thing that the Western philosophy is, because is it the religion or um, is it the sort of contributions to science and stuff like that? I don't really know. I mean, I think we're an interesting time in Western world anyway because um, I think stuff like Ukraine and Taiwan and stuff like that is showing that obviously the West's been the big political player since I guess since the Cold War, Second World War. It's been like the dominant power economically, and I guess things like Ukraine sort of challenging that at times. So we now it's an interesting time to ponder on like where the West has come from and what it means to live in this part of the world. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'd say the West has been the I don't know the most significant part of the world since the Industrial Revolution. Really, I'll go back as
mm,
far as then
yeah,
in terms of economic output.
yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Do you think that's going to change in the future uh, with like China and Russia, or do you think? I mean, I do think we need to fix certain parts of our cultures that is a lot of modern Western culture is making us quite weak and vulnerable, and I
Yeah,
think I think that certainly needs to change. But I don't know whether it will. Um, but I think it's up for grabs really. I mean, I don't know what you think.
yeah. I think there's a real death instinct in Western culture nowadays. I
A
think
what? A
there's
death
some.
instinct?
Yeah, well, I mean, like society wide, I feel like as a culture, we're almost trying to ensure our own eradication. Like that a lot of the things that we're doing, it basically seems like we're trying to atone for the sins of the Holocaust and this like colonial exploitation,
Hmm.
and in doing so, we're poisoning our own countries with like certain political viewpoints, which are going to lead to us basically slipping from the position at the top of the global dominance hierarchy that we've occupied for the last 250 years.
What sort of ideologies do you think is gonna poison us?
I think cultural relativism in the form of saying that everybody's viewpoint is equally valid
Mm.
is one thing. I think that the idea of the dissolution of gender boundaries and saying that anybody can be who they want, um, like even a lot of these ideas, it's difficult to even bring up just because it's almost taken on a religious characteristic where you're not allowed to question them as ideals
Yeah,
or
I
even
completely agree.
suggest they might be pernicious. Like I
Yeah,
think you really got to dance around the topic, but there's a lot of ways in which we're marching towards our own doom and doing so willingly.
yeah. No, I mean it's I respect the sort of say that because a lot of people I think might feel the same way, but don't necessarily like are too scared to sort of question it, right? I think that's in a sense the problem is. I mean, everyone's saying this all the time, but like, there's a lack of dialogue about it, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's weird. I mean, like the whole the whole thing about gender is quite interesting because it's really come out of nowhere. Like I mean, I can remember a time before the state we're in now with gender boundaries, and it's just interesting that the world's got to accept this new understanding of gender that's only really been around quite recently. You know, and
yeah,
you know whether it's right or not, it's really weird that we suddenly just have to. You're not allowed to question it, basically. I mean, something I worry about myself. What not necessarily worry, but think about is the idea of the family unit seems to be really devalued in the modern world, uh, and marriage is an institution as well. I think, and I think a lot about what's the right attitude to have towards those two things. Because I guess we live in a time now where you can have sex with impunity, like relative impunity, like if
yeah,
like with contraception, and it's interesting to like think about what that might do to your sort of attitude to family and stuff. I mean, it's weird, like if you watch these older films, like I mean, I guess The Godfather is a good example of like, you know, you basically people marry a lot younger, 100 years ago, and
yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know. What do you think about marriage and the family unit?
Uh, I think it's a real minefield
Yeah,
to
yeah,
discuss because I don't know. It's just the dissolving of boundaries in every sense in society, and it's like these social institutions have been with us for thousands of years and clearly arose for a reason. And I feel like it's modern arrogance to suggest that we know better and that we should be more accepting, as if that's going to produce a greater amount of happiness,
more
like net
accepting
happiness. I mean,
of what exactly?
well, like promiscuity, and it's really hard to discuss this topic in the current political landscape that we have to operate in. So I
Yeah, of
feel like
course, of course.
there's not there's nothing I can really say.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Um, no, I mean that's the problem. I mean, it's weird talking about because I think the sort of practical side of the West, like being powerful, is it's like economics and like it's military basically. But I think the
Yeah,
kind of discussion we're having about um, the family, like the sort of family unit, and stuff like um, modern political ideologies. It's weird. I almost think that stuff kind of comes like first. Uh, um, I don't know. I mean, I suppose what do you think? Do you think a culture's success is down to its ideology, or do you think it's just a case of the physical wealth it has? I mean, we were talking about how Protestantism sort of started the Industrial Revolution in one sense, and I wonder,
Yeah,
like, you got a lot of countries in Africa that are very rich in terms of resources, but if it's ruled by some like warlords or some corrupt politician, it doesn't really make the situation any better.
yeah, I agree. I think that the armies of the West basically have been utilised to promote their ideology across the world
Mm-hmm.
for a long time. Like that was the invasion in Iraq. That was Afghanistan. Like it was trying to institute democracies in
Yeah,
countries which were autocratic or communist. And I think the success of a nation is it's a complex interplay because I feel like there's a ton of different things which come into play uh, in terms of like the work ethics of the people operate within that society, the cultural values that they hold, the the material wealth that they have. But obviously, Britain's not the most like naturally wealthy country, like in terms of the raw resources it has. Like if you look
yeah,
at the Democratic Republic of Congo, they've got much more resources than Britain does,
yeah.
but it's a collapsing nation, and then our GDP is like 4 trillion. So I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
think it's the political institutions, and I think more importantly, it's the people who make it up.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you talk about work ethic. I mean, how important do you think it is to have a good work ethic, not just for the country you live in, but for your life generally? Because I think like it's really interesting. That seems to be something that people disagree on quite a lot. Like I know a lot of people who don't really see work as like a big part of their life. They think it's more about leisure. And then some people
Mm.
say the opposite. They think work is just how you get sort of a deep purpose in your life. I mean, I guess you've got quite a busy life in terms of work. With you do medicine as a degree, and then this sort of research we're talking about um, with quantum physics stuff, and yeah. So I don't know. What's your experience?
Um, I think it depends on how innately conscientious you are, how much you'll value work. So I think for me, I'm naturally quite conscientious. So I think hard work is important, and I think that in order to enjoy leisure, I have to earn it. In terms
Mm,
of I have done something which me 10 years down the line is going to benefit from. So I think it's really important, and I think it's like if you consider us as beings that move forward in time, then operating in the present as if you're going to be your future self at some point is probably the most valuable thing that you can do.
mm, mm. But do you think it varies? So you're saying like you're naturally more conscientious. Um, so let's say like you are naturally less conscientious, you might have a different attitude to it.
Yeah, I'd probably value leisure more
Mm,
and
mm.
then see work as an inconvenience that I should try and get out of and not find as much meaning in.
Yeah. So what you're saying is like you think it just depends on how the person's set up to.
Yeah, I think so. I think in some sense you're born with certain attributes, but I think a lot of them are cultivated for experience.
Yeah, yeah. No, I slightly agree. I mean, I think some people just see more meaning in work, hard work, I guess, than others.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and I mean, it's not necessarily good or bad because on the one hand, I mean, I think work is where you get a lot of your meaning in life. But you can work for the. It doesn't necessarily you can do like be a hard worker, but if your motivations are skewed, you could quite easily be working for the wrong thing. There's another way of looking at it. I mean, a
Yeah,
lot of the
definitely.
most
Yeah,
powerful leaders are incredibly, the most people like Stalin or I mean, I guess Stalin's the best example. Like really conscientious people, like really.
yeah,
I mean, it's funny, like really good work ethic, really skilled orator, um, but then like not necessarily. Well, no, obviously not a good person. So
yeah,
it's weird. I guess you got to have quite a nuanced attitude to it.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm gonna have to run off now anyway, but
Yeah,
I appreciate the conversation very much. I appreciate you having me on, and I've
yeah,
really enjoyed
it's been
talking
really
to you
interesting.
today.
Yeah, it's there's a lot to digest. I mean, it's been really fun,
Yeah,
and
definitely. Yeah,
hopefully have you on again in the future. I'll let you know when this is out, but thanks very much for doing this.
yeah, definitely. I think next time, if I'm less sick, I'll probably be able to organise my thoughts a bit better.
Yeah, no, honestly, I
Um,
think this is great what we've done. But yeah, I'll definitely be down to do it again sometime if you're
yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah,
brilliant.
sounds good.
Well, speak to you in a bit then.
All right, thanks very much.
Thanks,
See
bro.
you later.
See you later.